All right, I think we're ready to get started here. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. It's going to be about a 45-minute webinar on CBRS. We're going to have about 20 to 30 minutes of conversation. You'll hear from a few panelists here discussing CBRS, and then we're going to have about a 15 minutes Q&A session at the end of the webinar. I will also say, as we're kind of going throughout the webinar, if you have a question, feel free to throw that into the chat, and we will make sure to get it addressed at the end. Also, for anyone who wants to have kind of a separate and a conversation after the webinar, you want to talk with your account rep to learn a little bit more, throw that into the Q&A section as well, and we'll make sure to have your rep contact you to have a further discussion. And then just a little bit for the agenda here today. We are going to start off by kind of having Eric Hilton with Zebra Technologies kind of give us a lowdown of CBRS and the Zebra portfolio. And then we will have myself just kind of talk through some different use cases that we have seen where CBRS would be very valuable, as well as kind of talk about the ins and outs that Liberty can do from a vendor perspective to kind of help you roll this out if it's something you want to look at. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and close it out with a Q&A where we'll make sure to get all your questions answered and get those addressed for you. So first, we have Eric Hilton with Zebra Technologies, who's going to, like I said, kind of run through the different benefits and kind of what CBRS is, and then also kind of run through the portfolio as well that Zebra has for CBRS-enabled devices. So Eric, I will kick it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Clint. Appreciate that. Thanks for joining, everybody. As Clint mentioned, my name is Eric Hilton. I'm a regional portfolio manager for Zebra. That's a lot of words to say that I get to sit in a device strategy role. So the voice of customer, voice of partner, I get to collect all of that as it relates to our North American customers. And then I get to bring that back to our engineering departments. And I get to make sure that all of our devices are being developed with your input in mind. So we love those devices, but gosh, we really wish they had the next generation had thinner, lighter, sleeker, more rugged, less rugged, whatever the case may be. I want to hear about it. I want to know about it. I want to hear about it so that we can make sure that we are developing our portfolio with you and with your use cases in mind. So thank you very much in advance for any feedback that you are willing to provide. Now, today we're going to talk about private 5G CBRS. Now, first we got to start with what it is. And you may have heard the terms band 48 or private 5G or private LTE or CBRS. In general, most of our customers are coming to us asking one of those terms. There are slight nuances, but for the purposes of the conversation, we're just going to call it private cellular for the rest of this conversation, because ultimately that's typically what our customers are coming to us and asking. Now, if you want the official FCC definition of private cellular and CBRS, it's on the screen. I won't read it to you. Really what happens and really what this comes into play is in 2015, the FCC released a section of bandwidth in the 3.5 gigahertz band in the cellular spectrum, allowing the private sector to utilize that band and now be able to connect with a different modality of connection. And what that allows us to do is really open up some capabilities. And actually, if we flip back one slide, I want to chat real quick on that graphic first. Thank you very much. What that allows us to do is with private networks, think about private networks being based on cellular technology. It is cellular, it is 4G or 5G technology, and it is allowing our devices to connect. Now, unlike a public cellular network, the organization owns or leases the network infrastructure. So those two bullet points really sum up everything. Now, on this graphic here at the bottom, you think about the current connectivity modalities that many of our devices utilize. Today, we connect to Wi-Fi. And then when Wi-Fi is not available, we connect to public cellular. Now, that's a public tower that is owned or managed by one of the large carriers here in North America. But when available, I jump to Wi-Fi. When unavailable, I jump to cellular. And the device automatically figures out, just like in the consumer experience, when you and I come home at the end of the day, the device recognizes a known Wi-Fi network, and it prioritizes jumping over to the Wi-Fi network because that signal is typically A, stronger, B, faster, and C, more secure. So for those three purposes, we jump over to Wi-Fi when available, and when we're not, we jump over to cellular. Now, what CBRS does, and if we move on to the next slide, if we take a look at this graphic, CBRS and private cellular sit directly in between that Wi-Fi network and that public cellular network. So think about a device that's now I own a device, and let's say it's on a forklift, but I want to be able to connect to Wi-Fi when I'm inside the four walls. But then I leave the facility, but I'm out in the parking lot, or I'm in the yard, or I'm around the facility. That's where private networks come in, where I'm still close to that Wi-Fi network, but so I don't need to jump all the way over to the public carrier, but it might be really hard for me to run Wi-Fi. So, and that actually is a good transition to the next slide, where we're going to talk about one of these use cases. When we start to think about the warehouse or a manufacturing facility there on the left, so think about all the traditional MES or WMS type systems where I've got mostly green screen data, or I'm passing data back and forth to manage and track the operation inside the facility. Those are still typically going to remain Wi-Fi. Nobody's really ripping a Wi-Fi network out. Typically, I don't know about all of you, but from what I've seen in a warehouse, if it ain't broke, we're not messing with it. And that's really where I anticipate that Wi-Fi inside the building is still going to remain a very strong solution, especially existing warehouses. If it's already lit up, we're just going to leave it alone and let it run as is. But then transition to the right. Think about all the area around that warehouse. That's the yard where I've got trailers, or a rail yard where I may have train cars, or a shipping container on a port or on a dock. Think about the geographic area that now we own or use as a part of the operation, but it's really hard to run Wi-Fi around those areas. Nobody's trenching out through the parking lot to stand up a bunch of Wi-Fi access points. Where private 5G, where private cellular comes into play is now I can mount a base station or an AP on the side of the building, on the side of that warehouse, and now I can light up to 20 acres of area from that one appliance. So now think about, instead of trenching out through the parking lot and then standing up Wi-Fi access points out in the middle of the parking lot, now I can just put an appliance on the side of the building, and now I can light up and provide coverage to the entire parking lot, or the entire rail yard, or the entire laydown yard outside in the where it's the product that I'm storing is too large to come inside the building. Now I need my warehouse is outdoor. My spots where I drop everything off, and my pick locations and put locations, they're all still there. They just happen to be on the ground. Well, if they're on the ground, I don't have any infrastructure or a roof or a building that I can attach that Wi-Fi network to. That's really one of those opportunities where the coverage map that is available with private 5G and private cellular. Think about, from an area perspective, one private 5G or one private cellular access point base station could cover the same area as about 12 different Wi-Fi access points, because now I'm using the cellular radio in the device as opposed to the Wi-Fi radio in the device. And so typically it's about 12 to 1 type of a ratio. And so that's really offering us a number of opportunities for less cabling, some additional use case definitions where I own the physical space, but it's really hard to run Wi-Fi in those spaces. So if we move into the next slide, we're going to talk about outside of manufacturing TNL. There's tons of use cases as it relates to private 5G and private cellular. We talked a little bit about manufacturing, so I won't harp on that one. But we do see additional capabilities there, especially as customers are starting to think about automation. The historical 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi network, it may not be robust enough for automation and for robotics and things like that. That's where a private 5G and a private cellular network may come into play. I get really excited about airports and public venues. If you start to think about the ability to segregate the traffic, so think about, let's use a football stadium for a second. If I go to a football game along with 100,000 of my best friends, and we're all in the football stadium, and we're all posting or streaming or whatever, checking the internet for whatever reason, and posting and live streaming video left and right, that's going to bog down a network, a public carrier network. And that's okay for the fans. It might take an extra couple of seconds for that video to upload, or there might be some latency. But now think about the traffic and the communication required to run the event. Security, medics, payment, so that I can process payment as quickly as possible and get more folks through the merchandise line or through the concessions lines. That's a revenue driver. Being able to segregate the traffic, allowing our customers to the attendees at that venue to utilize the public network as they see fit. B, give them access to a Wi-Fi network if we want to. That's great. Guest Wi-Fi, they're happy, but it doesn't bog our network down or anything like that. But I still get the ability to run my event efficiently and effectively without any interference from those fans. Now that means increased revenue. That means lower latency communication to security and to critical event staff that may be required in the event of an emergency. So that segregation of traffic really offers some additional benefits, especially when we start to talk about hospitality and airports, public venues, cruise ships, things like that, where the attendees and where the general public come, and that public network can get crippled pretty quickly. So additionally, I'm actually going to move left to right here. So we talked a lot about warehouses. We won't harp on that. Mining, oil and gas are becoming very, very popular areas for private 5G and private cellular, because typically they're out in the middle of a oil field or a mining operation, and it may be difficult to run Wi-Fi, obviously. Some of them may not even have public internet of public cellular available to them in their locations. So now from one office or from one base station, I could set up a satellite internet at the main station, and then backhaul all of that traffic and plug in a CBRS access point. And now I'm going to light up again that 20 acres of coverage. Now I get to be able to communicate with everybody that's on those on that oil field or on that mining field. Think about the ranges of like an LMR radio or a two-way radio, being able to communicate. But now I can do all of that and so much more with a mobile computer in my hands. One of the furthest over there on the right that I'm most excited about also is healthcare. If you think about the hospital and the number of connected things inside the hospital, whether that is the patient's phone and tablet because they're going to watch movies while they're at the hospital, or whether that is live streaming so that they can communicate with their loved ones, or communicate via telehealth with their care providers. In addition to that, now every single IV pump, every single monitor, they're all connected. All of those endpoints are going to start to cripple a Wi-Fi network. And we want to make sure that we're giving patients the best experience possible. Why? Because patient experience has a direct impact on the hospital's revenue stream. So better patient outcomes, more money for the hospital. So it's really important to make sure that we're protecting the patient and their quality of experience of connectivity, but we still got all these devices and all of these things that we want to connect. So that's where a private network and a private cellular solution really comes into play. Now, if we scroll to the next slide, let's take a look at Zebra's portfolio. We are leaning in hard on this conversation. We recognize the benefits. As you would expect from Zebra, everything that we do is built around, number one, enterprises. Number two, everything that we do is voice of customer driven. We are being asked every single day about our private 5G strategy, our private cellular strategy. The good news, every single cellular enabled device that we've launched in the last 2 years has been private 5G, private cellular enabled. Every single device on our roadmap coming up in the future is going to be cellular enabled and going to be private 5G enabled. So we'll talk here again in a minute about a specific device, that MC9400, but we recognize that this is going to offer our customers a unique experience where now they don't need to worry about just connecting with Wi-Fi and then public carriers. That may be great for a consumer experience, but when have the needs of a consumer and the needs of an enterprise ever been perfectly aligned? This is now offering us additional modalities of connectivity. So where now we can leverage Wi-Fi when it makes sense, we can leverage that public network when it makes sense when I leave the facility, or we can leverage private cellular when I own the physical space, when I own the yard, when I own the stadium, but it's really difficult to run Wi-Fi, or I want to segregate my traffic away from everybody. So the three big points, if you take nothing away from this, from Zebra, number one, we're focused on it. Almost every single cellular enabled device in our portfolio supports private 5G, private cellular, at least everything that we've launched in the latest generation. And then the benefits. So think about additional coverage, additional capacity, optimized so that we can now provide lower latency and better quality of service so that we can future-proof ourselves. And then lastly, security. This can be firewalled and managed exactly the same way that our Wi-Fi infrastructure is managed. So I own that cellular, that private 5G appliance. I own that like I own a Wi-Fi access point today, which means I can firewall it. The only way to connect to it is to program an eSIM or to put a physical SIM inside the device, because I'm using the cellular radios. Now, it's near impossible for that to be hacked because now I'm physically putting a SIM inside my device that connects to that private cellular network. Significant security increases come into play, and security is becoming more and more of a topic along the way. Now, transformational. The next slide, we're going to talk about one big opportunity. We know that our customers are looking for this technology, and they're looking for it in more than just our traditional cellular devices. So we're excited that the MC9400, historically the MC9 class device, was a Wi-Fi only solution. Now we're excited that the MC9450 is launching right now. And what it offers is cellular connectivity in that MC9 class. So the traditional MC9, where there's a couple million MC9s in the US running, operations from everything from retail environments to warehouse environments. Every single one of those, when those customers say, but my infrastructure team is asking me to consider private 5G, great, don't worry about it. We got it covered. And Zebra's even helping with that, where we are offering a Go Zebra trade-in program of $250 anytime you trade in one of the eligible devices, which is basically any mobile computer that runs an operating system. When you trade that in to buy an MC9400, we're excited that we're going to be able to offer a $250 back-end rebate to get that other device out of your deployment and put that MC9400 into your deployment. But we're doubling down on it. We're actually going to add in a $150 bonus on top of that. So a total of $400 when you're trading in one of those competitive devices. Notable that none of the competitive devices out there that look or act like an MC9400 Notable that none of them have private cellular, private 5G. And so with that, we are enabling our customers to migrate to the MC9400 family. If they want to take that private cellular version and they want to go with that MC9450, they're welcome to. But either MC9400 Wi-Fi only or MC9450 cellular enabled device, we are offering both that $250 Go Zebra trade-in as well as that $150 bonus when you trade in one of the competing products. Now, I said a whole lot. I'm going to pass it over to Clint, and we'll chat some more about some use cases around CBRS and private 5G, and then we'll be excited to answer some questions here momentarily.
Appreciate it, Eric. Thank you for that and the insights you gave there. As mentioned, Clint Larson, I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Liberty Systems, and kind of a part of my role here is we, not only in the sales portion, but we also, we help kind of with the whole project management of everything for our customers. So we're going to do everything from figuring out exactly, what kind of Zebra hardware you need to look at, what kind of CBRS equipment we need to be looking at to kind of help bring your project to fruition. And the reason we're looking at CBRS for our customers is over the last few years we're just starting to see a lot more unique needs and challenges within our customer base. So mostly within the manufacturing facilities or distribution centers, but we're needing to be able to do more. We need to be able to bring wireless outside of our warehouse. We need to be able to get it into areas where our current wireless infrastructure just doesn't quite get us to. We need to have better performance, everything from we need better roaming, we need better handoffs, we need better coverage within the space where we have that wireless connectivity. We also need to do a better job of mitigating the interference. So other wireless networks that might be near our facility, microwave waves, anything can kind of cause interference. And we're needed to look at a way to better mitigate that. Also better security. It's a very big focal point for a lot of customers right now. Being able to make their network more secure. How do we do that? How can we do that? We can utilize CBRS for that. And then also flexibility and cost savings. So we don't want to put some infrastructure in place that's only going to be, there for a few years and then needs to be upgraded. So we're able to be a little bit more flexible, or we have to be more flexible, and we need to be able to do it by keeping costs down for our customer as well. And as we'll kind of get into here, CBRS allows us to do that for our customers. So the first example we're looking at here is, shipping yards or anywhere with outdoor inventory. So any kind of, lumber yard, anyone who's using building or concrete products where they have, a massive amount of inventory outside, where they quite don't get that wireless coverage. Let's look at CBRS for, getting that coverage out to those areas. As Eric mentioned, we can even see a 12-to-1 ratio when we're utilizing a CBRS AP versus wireless APs. But we see that we're able to get about, one CBRS access point can get us about the same amount of coverage outside as about 10 wireless APs. So that right there is a great advantage because we don't have as much cost put into hardware. We're not having to run as many cables. We're not having to put up any poles or electrical boxes to kind of, help with that infrastructure. So that's a very big advantage there. And as Eric mentioned too, we're also able to get more coverage. So we're able to get that coverage into more areas. So when we're talking outside, we might need to go around, shipping containers. We might need to get coverage, somewhere where, it's acres away. We're able to do that with CBRS and again, be able to do it with kind of a less infrastructure cost. We're also able to, better manage interferences. So by the way CBRS works, it actually has multiple spectrums that it can choose from. So as different assets or devices are connecting to that CBRS network, it's intelligently telling those devices which spectrum to be on based on some other assets around them. So you're able to lower that interference and be able to just have more throughput and higher density on that CBRS network as well. And we're also seeing that, as Eric mentioned, we're in these different spaces, we're starting to see more hardware, cameras, automation machinery, coming with CBRS capability. And just being able to put those on the CBRS network is a huge advantage because now we're able to get more assets on, more clients on, and we're not going to have to give up any kind of latency issues. We're going to keep latency low, roaming is going to be better, and just the overall performance of that network is going to be greatly increased utilizing that CBRS network. And then in a use case like this, where we're outside or within those shipping yards, we really like the Zebra MC9400, the device that Eric just talked about. It's a very rugged device. It can be used outside. It's going to stand up to the elements. So we really like that in kind of a use case like this. As well as the rugged tablets, the ET65, and then those rugged handhelds. So kind of those cell phone type devices, the TC58 and the TC78. All are fantastic devices, rugged enough to be used in these scenarios, but also come with that CBRS capability. And then the next example we're looking at here is just the warehousing and distribution center. So just the general warehouse, general distribution center. Again, it's a lower infrastructure investment. So like we saw about a 10 or 12-to-1 ratio outside, we see about a 5-to-1 ratio inside. So you're still able to get better coverage with just one CBRS access point, but we're only seeing about, take the place of about 5 wireless access points when we're inside. You're able to improve performance with that CBRS. So what's great about the bandwidth that the CBRS network is on, that 3.5, is that the wavelengths are much longer. So that allows them to actually go around obstacles better. So you can get around that machinery a little bit better. You can kind of get in between those racks a little bit better with the CBRS network. But it's also less susceptible to absorption. So as you're going through metals, as you're going through liquid, as you're going through concrete walls, you just have a little bit less signal loss, with that CBRS network, which is very helpful when we're talking about a warehouse or distribution center where we have a lot going on there. Also, the increased capacity. So as we start throwing on those robotics or autonomous vehicles, or we start, looping in different cameras or IoT systems, we're able to bring more in and still have a low latency and better roaming and better coverage, with our network. We're not going to get bogged down because, again, the way that the CBRS system works in allocating those different spectrums that it has access to. And then again, in the warehouse too, we really like that MC9450. Again, it's a very rugged unit. You can scan very long range with it. And again, it has that CBRS capability, so you're able to utilize that inside the 4 walls and outside the 4 walls. Same thing with that TC58 and the 78, as well as that rugged tablet that Zebra offers as well. And that wraps up kind of what we were talking about today. And now we just have, our Q&A section. We do have quite a few questions that did come in. So what I'll do is I'll ask them, and then, Eric, I'll just be directing these at you. And then, if there's anything that I need to add on or feel that we need to add on, I'll just kind of do that. But the first question we had, we just kind of talked about this, but, how many Wi-Fi access points can be replaced by one CBRS access point?
Yeah, that's a great call out. And you showed, I mentioned 12, you showed 10 and 5. So there's a really important distinction between pure math and pure unobstructed space. It could be up to 12. But once you start putting product in a warehouse, or once you start putting containers in the shipping yard, that's where you start to recognize, just like with any access point or any type of network connectivity, once you start filling up the physical space, you start to also diminish that coverage. And so typically, let's say the maximum best case is 12, but typically outside, to your points that you made, you're going to see about 10 outdoor access points could be replaced by one CBRS access point. And indoor, because the area is significantly more dense with product or with racking and things like that, you're going to see be able to replace about 5 access points with one CBRS access point.
Great, thank you. Yeah, great point about, again, just the environment in general is going to play a good part of, exactly how many access points we can get, per one CBRS. And then another question we have here too is, why is roaming better with CBRS in terms of compared to a standard wireless network?
Yeah, it really comes down to when you roam, the avoidance of roaming. So no matter what, when I'm connected and I have a strong connection, especially if, for example, I'm staying still in an environment, I'm going to have a phenomenal connection. But it's when I start moving, it's when I start driving a forklift, and as I'm driving from one end of the facility to another end of the facility, I start to recognize that I lose coverage on the access point, and then I jump to another access point. Now, Zebra's done a lot to mitigate this in our devices by enabling two Wi-Fi radios so that I connect to the next access point before I lose the previous one. But the great thing about that increased coverage is now I'm roaming less. And so therefore I have less opportunity for connectivity drop or packet loss. All of those things come into play because now I'm not roaming near as often as I would be in a traditional Wi-Fi network.
Right. And then is it difficult to integrate CBRS into an existing wireless infrastructure?
No, it's actually pretty simple. So we think about today, when you're going to install a Wi-Fi network, you run cabling, you plug an Ethernet cable into the Wi-Fi access point, and now you have wireless internet. The same exact mechanism that you would do, the same exact solution that you would do for that Wi-Fi network, you're going to do that for a CBRS network, where I buy the CBRS access point and then I plug an Ethernet cable into the end of it. The difference is the signal that it is transmitting is cellular connectivity, not a Wi-Fi connectivity. So I own the appliance just like I own that access point. And when I'm connecting it to my network, I'm plugging an Ethernet cable into the end of it, so that now I don't have to worry about. So that's how I'm transmitting and backhauling all of that information back to my servers and eventually up to the cloud.
Great. And I guess just to build on that too, a question we did have come in that I can help answer is, how much is this system? So if you actually look at like a partner of ours, Solona, they do a kind of cool thing where they wrap the hardware, the support, and basically the CBRS software all into, kind of one product for the customers. So what we see, so for a 5-year subscription for like a Solona, we see it be around $30,000. And yes, that does seem like a lot, but again, that's for 5 years of that device. So right around $6,000 for the hardware, the subscription, and then the support that goes along with it, per year. So around $6,000 per year. But what's nice about that is if you look at kind of the old way of utilizing access points, you'd have to buy the hardware, one-time purchase, it's yours. Then you have to buy the software, and then you have to buy the support, and then that support is renewable. When you look at Solona or a company like Solona, they kind of wrap it all up into one subscription for you. It's a very advantageous way to roll this out. So $30,000 for a 5-year subscription, around $20,000 for a 3-year subscription. And obviously, we can talk more about price, once we get to that point with, specific projects. So Eric, another question for you is what security measures are there to protect CBRS-based networks from cyber attacks? So what extra security does CBRS offer over wireless?
Yeah, that's a great call out. So the nice thing about, because it is cellular technology, I mentioned it as we were chatting through, but I might have gone through it a little quick. When we talk about cellular connectivity, the nice thing about CBRS is because it is reliant and because it utilizes the cellular radio in the device, number one, and the infrastructure utilizes that cellular connectivity, it requires a SIM card. So whether that's a physical SIM or an eSIM installed in the device, now I don't have somebody sitting there with access or in the range of my Wi-Fi network trying to guess the network passphrase or anything like that. The only devices that can connect to my network are the ones that I've configured to connect to my network because I've had access to them and I physically put that SIM card in the device, which now allows me to connect to my infrastructure. So the great thing about it is I can firewall the servers and I can firewall the communication just like I do on a Wi-Fi connectivity solution. But in addition to that, one added layer is that if someone wants to connect to my network, they have to have physical access to the device. So there's added security layers in there, where the only devices that I want connected are the ones that I've configured to connect.
And you did touch on it a little bit too, but I might just have you kind of go into a little bit more. The differences are basically how you manage a CBRS network, in relation to how a current wireless network would be managed. Is it still the same kind of console management style?
Yeah, and actually, you called out. I One of the ones that's doing it the best, in my opinion, is Solona. And they are doing everything they can to make that experience of managing a CBRS network that look and feel and act very similar to the way that you would manage a traditional Wi-Fi network. You really, that management, that go-to-market model, that installation looks and feels very similar. Number one, you just need less endpoints, you need less access points. And number two, you can cover so much more area and different areas because you have them. But at the end of the day, the focus is really making to drive adoption, making it familiar and making it easily understood of how you would manage that, how you would push updates, mesh networking capabilities, all of those types of communications and all those types of things really come into play really well here.
And Eric, in areas where there's not great cell coverage currently from like an AT&T or a Verizon or a Sprint, how is CBRS going to see similar results, or maybe talk a little bit more about how that might look?
Yeah, it's actually going to be so very similar. So let's imagine that you don't have any public carrier in your town, and you don't have any AT&T or any Verizon or any T-Mobile coverage. Um, Today, you could run, if you had internet, a hard line dropped in, you could run your own Wi-Fi access point, and then you kind of don't care what the cellular coverage looks like because you've got strong Wi-Fi. Same thing with cellular, with private 5G and private cellular. When you install your access point for CBRS in that environment, you have phenomenal coverage. The public network may never be there. It may not. It may never make its way to that specific remote area, but because you've got a CBRS base station, a CBRS AP, and you've got a connection to the internet, you're connected to the internet and you're utilizing that network. You are completely segregated, separated from the public carriers. And you also can avoid that monthly bill to the carriers. You're not dependent upon anybody because you own the infrastructure that you are then lighting up your network or your area with.
So basically lighting up your facility as its own little
Yep.
private cellular tower.
Yep. And you're less worried about your neighbors, obviously, because they're not going to have public network and they're only going to be able to connect to your network if you let them. So from that perspective, you're gonna take your own connectivity strategy into your own hands in that environment.
And the last question we do have here is, what are the limitations to a CBRS or a private cellular infrastructure?
Yeah, it's still new technology. Let's be clear about it. So you noticed the FCC released this spectrum in 2015. The spectrum's been there for a long time. The U.S. Navy had exclusive rights to it and exclusive use of it for many, 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 many years. And now, effectively, the technology has opened up to the private sector, and that happened in 2015, which not that long ago from a connectivity perspective. Now, what that means is there's still some of those aspects of where Wi-Fi is very mature and the management tools around Wi-Fi are very mature. The technology generations, we've had how many different levels of 802.11 standards that have been put into place. We'll see some of those things. They will come down the road as this technology continues to proliferate. So the biggest limitation is that it's just newer and therefore slightly different, and therefore managed just a little bit. There's some nuances, but like I mentioned, the folks like Solona are doing a phenomenal job of removing those barriers. And the other big challenge that I see is this is driving device refreshes. Number one, historical cellular enabled devices that if they've been in your deployment for 4 or 5 years, they're probably not going to support CBRS. It is a special certification that Zebra has to go do, and we do it on all of our newer devices. So that's number one. Number two is our customers are coming to us and they're saying, you know what? I don't know what the future of my infrastructure is going to look like. Today I'm Wi-Fi only, but my network team may ask me to do private 5G down the road. I'm just going to go ahead and buy the cellular enabled version of the Zebra device, just to future proof myself. And that's where really the big challenge, or the big opportunity, I guess, is for all of us to just think ahead of today. I need Wi-Fi, but tomorrow or a year from now or 2 years from now, my networking team may drive a change, and I want to be ready for that. And that's where many of our customers are looking at this as an opportunity as they're going through device refreshes. Let's go ahead and future proof myself, because then when my networking team comes to me and encourages me, or what level of encouragement there is dependent upon the team, but sometimes it's more of a mandate. Now I can say, you know what, I anticipated this. I thought you might come to me and ask me that, so I went ahead and got that cellular enabled device. We're good. I don't need to worry about it. Now you're in the position of saving the company some money down the road, from a device refresh perspective, because you're future proofing yourself.
Well, great, Eric. Thank you so much for answering those questions and providing that just information and insight just to private cellular in general, as well as the different hardware. So thank you very much for being a part of our webinar here. Just so everyone does know, we did record the webinar here. So after we wrap up, we will be sending that recording out. But as you see on the screen there, if you have any further questions, or if you want to talk about this a little bit more, feel free to send us an email or give us a call, and we would love to have a conversation and help figure out if private cellular or CBRS network is right for your organization.